Hi, Gio here, and we're on a 658 Endurance, and we are going to do a quick startup procedures. But before I throw any switches or turn any keys, I always go down to the engine room and make sure everything's okay down there. One of the perks of my job is I get to drive all sorts of different boats, and I have a few procedures that are in my head to look at the first time I jump into somebody's engine room. The first thing I check in the engine room is the oil. You find your dipstick. If you're lucky, they're on both sides of you. Pull the dipstick out, wipe it clean, and then put it right back in. Make sure it sits all the way around so that the stick is all the way down to the bottom of the pan. Then you pull it out and check that it's got to the full mark. And what I do is check both sides and make sure that it's the same on both. Looks good. Now we're going to go back to the gearbox and check its oil. Now it is to be checked while the engine's warm and it's in neutral for this particular model. However, if I'm just jumping on a boat and I'm not familiar with it, I'm still going to pull both dipsticks up, check the level, and I'm making a mental note of that level so I can go and check it on the very other side, and it's in the same spot on both sides. For one thing, that just tells me is that, well, there is oil in there and that it's consistent from one side to the other. So there's nothing alarming. If one was higher than the other, well, then I'd want to make sure I check that once it was warm. Before I start up anybody's boat, I always check to make sure the engine water intake through holes are open in the upward position in this boat. Both are open. So we're good there. Here's our sight glasses for our starboard fuel tank. And since I don't know this boat and I'm jumping on board, I want to make sure it's got plenty of fuel. So I'm going to open the upper valve and the lower valve. And now I know that's an accurate reading. I do close them again because in the unlikely event this sight glass was to break, you don't want thousands of gallons of fuel going into your bilge. Next, I like to check the fuel filters. This is a dual system, and there's really not a lot I can check on the filter, but I can look in the bowls, and what I like to do is shine a light behind it, and then you will be able to see any debris or water much easier. And these look great. Here's our sea strainers on the port side. We check the through hole and it's open, and now I'll just take a look, just sort of like the fuel filter with the light behind it. Make sure they're not filled up with debris or the screen's clogged, anything like that. You want to make sure your water flow's going to be good. And this looks great. Here's your engine start battery switches, so you want to make sure they're on, and if you're going to run a generator, you'd also want to do the same for it. The last thing I'll check before I take off from the engine room is the fuel system. We checked the filters, but now we want to make sure that the fuel is directed to the right spot from the right tank and then returned to the right tank. It's very important to make sure that this is correct. We're up in the pilot house at the panel, and we're going to throw the necessary switches in order to start the boat. We have electronic controls, so we're turning them on. Our trim tabs, I'm going to run with a horn, and our stabilizers, a windlass, and then the bow and stern thruster. Any navigation equipment, I like the autopilot, the depth finder. It's very clear out. I'm not going to turn the radar in at port right now. And then we have our air intake engine room blowers. Very important. Make sure those are on and running before you start. First, I'm going to turn the key just one turn to activate the stations so that they come up and wait till they get to their home screen before I start the engine. And while I'm waiting for that, I'll engage my electronic controls. This quick shift by twin disc, I push and hold the button. I get 4 green lights. It's in neutral, and we're ready to start. Now that the cat panels are up to home screens and we have our electronic controls engaged and in neutral, we're okay to start the engines. I'm going to do one at a time. And I let it come up to its comfortable idle. And then I'll do the next one. That's for battery management and just being able to hear the engines running. The next thing I'll do is turn on my thruster system here by ABT track by pushing the start button. It says station enabled, and I'm going to give it a little test, just a quick. I can feel that each way. I always check the controls in the thruster for proper operation before I untie the boat to go. I'm tied at the dock tight, and I'm going to give it a quick, just one click, and then back to neutral once I hear it engage. Same with the reverse. Same with the other one. Shifters are working, your thruster system's working. Now we'll just check the wheel and make sure it's feeling like it has pressure and going the proper amount of turns each direction. Four and a half turns, right on. We're ready to disconnect our power and untie the boat and go have a nice cruise.